So you bailed out the nation's banks to the tune of billions of dollars. Has that money been well spent? As NBC's senior investigative correspondent Lisa Myers reports, the financial institutions that are now feeding off the public these days were living pretty high on the hog in the past. Lisa, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. They certainly were. Even by Wall Street standards, the numbers are striking. Top executives of banks bailed out by taxpayers were paid more than $1 billion last year, rewarded in some cases for deals that later imploded.
Distinguished members of the diplomatic...
At the top of the heap, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, Lloyd Blankfein, who received $68 million last year. The company's top 5 executives were paid more than $250 million in compensation in 2007. Back then, the company reported record earnings, but only months later, Goldman needed $10 billion from taxpayers.
The chutzpah of those guys. Marie Antoinette would be embarrassed.
An analysis by the Associated Press found that 116 banks, which have received a combined $188 billion in taxpayer bailouts, paid their top executives $1.6 billion in salaries, bonuses, and other benefits in 2007. Compensation experts argue that many pay packages rewarded risky deals and actually contributed to the financial debacle.
They were getting paid for all the wrong things. And now that the numbers that generated those bonuses have been proven to be false, they don't have to give any of it back.
Goldman Sachs top executives have decided to forego big bonuses this year, but the firm said it has handed out almost $11 billion in bonuses and compensation to other employees, a 46% reduction from last year. Insurance giant AIG recently paid $100 million in retention bonuses. The bailout program itself has few restrictions on pay and virtually nothing on perks. Last year, New York Mellon paid $171,000 for its CEO's car and driver. And J.P. Morgan Chase paid $211,000 for private jets to ferry CEO Jamie Dimon between New York and his home in Chicago. Some lawmakers want Wall Street CEOs who took bailout money to come before Congress and, like the big 3 automakers, be forced to justify perks like corporate jets.
I've been particularly concerned about some of the kind of stick it in the taxpayer's eye perks that are continuing, whether that be the charter aircraft or the chauffeur-driven limousines.
In fact, the banks which receive billions of taxpayer dollars are, for the most part, refusing to disclose, Matt, how they are spending the money. And so far, neither Congress nor the Bush administration has required a public accounting.
Lisa Myers. Lisa, thanks very much. Lisa's in Washington for us this morning. Erin Burnett covers the world of finance for CNBC. Erin, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Going to make some people angry. Okay, let's talk about some of the examples that Lisa just gave. Merrill Lynch's CEO reportedly made $83 million while the firm was losing almost $8 billion. Goldman Sachs gets $10 billion in taxpayer money. Last year, their CEO made over $50 million. Is business sense different from common sense?
Yeah, when you hear that, it certainly makes you think what was going on here. I mean, part of the issue, Matt, is that, and it's hard to defend when you hear these numbers, but the reality of it is a lot of this compensation isn't actually cash compensation. What they've tried to do over the past few years is try to create incentives so that people will make better, longer-term decisions. So a lot of that money, we're adding it all in up front, but a lot of that money is, for example, options on stock that might not happen for 4 or 5 years.
I know, but Joe and Mary Smith out there who try to run their family business, if they lose lots of money in that business, they go out of business. They don't get this kind of money for doing that kind of job, and they say, where's the fairness in this?
Right. Now, that's where I think this year is going to be important. You have GM, all the car companies obviously are taking no bonuses. AIG, no bonus. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. Jamie Dimon hasn't said yet he's not going to take one, but I'd be shocked if he did. He's not going to. All of these CEOs are now working for pretty much nothing to try, precisely because of the taxpayer money that they've taken. If you look at the average number there of what the AP study had said, these bank CEOs make about $2.6 million of the banks that have gotten money.
Is that salary?
That includes salary as well as bonus and benefits. So that includes everything in there. That number may sound big, but if you compare it to what companies in the S&P 500 made last year on average, that was $14.2 million. So you do see it coming down in reaction to the crisis.
Okay, but as part of the auto bailout that the president announced last week, he did say the government will be able to restrict executive compensation and perks like these private private jets.
Right.
Is that not going? Is there nothing written in the bailout for banking institutions that gives the government that same power?
There is one crucial thing in there. They can't get golden parachutes. So if you leave those pre-negotiated giant sums of money, they're not allowed to take those. There's one other crucial thing. The only other thing in there, I mean, frankly, I would say a lot of those restrictions didn't have teeth, but this one was important. If it is found, looking back, that they knew they were making bad decisions, that they were basing their assumptions on perhaps fraud, then then they have to give their money back.
That's common sense. And finally, what Lisa mentioned toward the end there, do we have a right as taxpayers to know where this bailout money is going? That in fact the banks are lending it to people, creating mortgages, as opposed to making their bottom line look better.
And that is a key question. And Jamie Dimon, who she talked about there, by the way, he was using that plane because his kids were still in high school, I believe. So that was one of his pre-negotiated things, to be able to go see them on the weekends. But Jamie Dimon, I asked him, he got $25 billion last week when I talked to him from the government.
The company
JP Morgan did, right. Exactly, the company. He said, I didn't ask for it, I didn't want it, I didn't need it. But I said specifically, if you were asked to come forward and say, here's my $25 billion, JP Morgan Chase, what did I do with it? Could you do that? And he said, no. He said, think of it like a checking account. It goes in a pool of money that I can only use for certain things, but it goes in that pool.
But one of the things you're supposed to use it for is to get it to the consumer.
Right. So he says he's not going to account for exactly how he uses the $25 billion, but he did go through to say that student loans, credit card loans, banking, commercial loans to companies all are up sharply. He gave the numbers of the past year. So he tries to say he's using it for loans, tries to give the numbers, but says he can't specifically account for the $25 billion. I don't know if that's going to make the mark in Congress.
I think there's some taxpayers who think they should be able to account
and that's
for where it goes.
a very fair question.
Erin Burnett. Erin, thanks very much.
Thanks, Matt.